Obviously traditional data security has been the standard, golden standard for over 30 years. Talk to me about why traditional data security is just no longer cutting it. Why are enterprises choosing data-centric security? What's the real reason, Isaac?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. And I think it's because the way we work has fundamentally shifted over the last 30 years, right? When you really look back, if we go to the Wayback Machine and really think about how all of this started, it was all about a device and a person, and that person was typing away, and they figured out how they can create essentially information faster, right? Instead of a typewriter, they could bang away on a PC and create some documents and then share them easily through a floppy disk, right? They pop them around and share them from there. And back in the old days, we used to call that sneaker right? Before there was actually networking technology. Well, of course, viruses, people figured out, hey, well, I can, put a virus on this thing and on a floppy disk, pop it into a machine, and then, carries on from there. So it was a sneaker net kind of thing carried forward. And I think, that's where the whole term virus came from. And so of course, then we started to say, well, we've got to protect the device itself, right? Before we were calling them endpoints, it was just, hey, we got to protect the device itself. Do you have antivirus software, et cetera? And then we decided, hey, let's start networking all of these computers together with a local area network within a specific department or a specific company. And then, of course, the internet. How do we start to really tie all of these things together and have this, hyper speed type of communication? Well, of course, then the bad guys figured that out as well and said, hey, not only can I create these viruses that hop on floppy disks, but now I can actually send them over the network quickly. So when we move from device-centric protection, which I kind of always think about as the first wave of cybersecurity, right? Before, again, it was even cybersecurity. That was like the impetus. And then they said, oh, hey, now we're networking all these machines together. Now we've got to start to protect it within a perimeter. So we have our local area network. How do we protect all of these assets within there, which is the devices themselves and, of course, the information. And back then, it really wasn't, I think, about exfil. It was more about corruption and really damaging the data from that perspective. But then, of course, exfil, people said, whoa, well, I figured out that this data is actually very valuable to you and valuable to others. I can extract that out and go do something with it. And then, of course, we said, okay, now we got to protect the perimeter on that side. So then, the second wave came out and it said, hey, let's start getting everything and putting it inside of this castle or this vault and protect it, or put it inside the castle and let's put vaults within the castle as well to try to make it even harder. Well, then, of course, as the internet grew, we started to get all these interconnected services that we were starting to use, and the API economy really started, where everybody said, hey, I've got this API and you could pass data to me and I could do something, and then I pass it to you and you do something. And of course, that was great to pass around the data. And then they said, hey, we can create more value out of this data. But I want to prove that you are who you say you are so you can use these services and enrich this data or add value to it. And that's kind of the third wave of the cybersecurity space, right? And it was really about identity protection or validation as well. And I would argue that's kind of where we're at right now. And we're kind of moving out of that a little bit. And so when you think about the first wave, second wave, and third wave, really the device, the perimeter, and the identity, there's been this key piece that's been kind of forgotten about when you think about the security constructs that have been put in place, and that's the data itself. Even though that's the most valuable thing within this entire value chain, which is the person, the device, and the data that's created from that device. And I would say maybe it's not really, it hasn't been forgotten, but it hasn't, everybody said, hey, this kind of perimeter-based approach or this vault-based approach is going to go work well for our data. Well, of course, now with the cloud and everything else that's going on, you're storing data in all these different places. So not only is it saying, hey, I'm going to store data in the cloud on purpose, but what happens when I'm on the go and I'm at the beach on vacation? Somebody calls me and says, hey, Isaac, I just need you to do this one quick thing for me. I pull up my phone. I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. Let me go to the cloud. I'm going to pull down that piece of sensitive data. Now I have a copy on my phone. I do something to it. Now I send it over. That data has just replicated itself instantly. Even though we said, hey, it's going to stay in this vault, I figured out a way, not nefariously, but because I needed to do my job, I pulled it down. And now that data is at risk of being on my phone or accidentally being, what happens if I lose my phone and somebody has access to that data now? And so when you think about that specific scenario, you also think about collaboration, right? Really, our economy now runs at the speed of data sharing or collaboration. You have supply chains out there, extremely complicated supply chains, and we saw the impact of that during COVID when one piece of the supply chain slows down, everything else slows down. So collaboration and communication must happen. What is the core of communication? It's communicating information and data back and forth. Well, what happens if I'm building something that's super secret or very sensitive and I have this IP that I want to protect? Well, I've got to share it with primary vendors, secondary vendors, tertiary vendors, so on and so forth, down this value chain on that side. How can I trust all those people? Well, we all have an NDA. Okay, it's a piece of paper, but that doesn't necessarily say I still have control over what's happening to that IP. I can lose track of it. Somebody could copy it down to their phone and then send that off, or it can get easily stolen and sent off to another country. Now we're even talking about state-sponsored kind of supply chain attacks to steal secrets on that side, right? So so to kind of close it off on your question, there is the way we are collaborating now is not based on a perimeter anymore, right? In the past, when all of the employees were within the local area network, and you could say, hey, everything is happening within this kind of microcosm of a organization, that's easy. But now you have this hyper interdependent global supply chain. How do you keep track of that? And that's where we really say that data-centric security is becoming this fourth wave of cybersecurity when we're focusing on the data itself. And fundamentally, what does that even mean, right? What does data-centric security mean? It means that, hey, instead of putting that data inside the perimeter and putting it in a vault and protecting the vault, what if you could actually put the perimeter around every single piece of sensitive information, or what we call digital assets? What if you could put a perimeter around that? And it follows the data wherever it goes. So essentially you get all the goodness that you've already invested in the perimeter, right? So you have access control, this a role-based access control, you have logging, you have permission-based access. You can actually have granular access controls on what they can do with the data. You can read, you can write, stuff like that. But what if you could actually put that around an individual piece of data? So no matter if it's inside of your organization or outside, in the cloud, in the supply chain, on somebody's cell phone, you can still maintain control of that. And that's really the big difference of perimeter-based type of approaches versus data-centric approaches. So it's really saying, where do you actually apply the perimeter? The other reason this is important is if I'm an or if I'm a security professional or an IT professional, and I say, hey, I'm going to send this over to a third party, I can't guarantee that they have the same security controls or are as stringent of a security shop as I am. So I'm really trusting them. This way, with data-centric security, I can actually still provide and apply the same security policies that I expect on my data and put that down the value chain outside of my organization and making sure that it's still A-OK and it's still protected.